Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to Tableau Conference. Welcome to Vegas. I hope you're having a wonderful time at the conference this year. They say what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So this is our stays in Vegas secret. We are no Tableau experts. We are fairly new to Tableau ourselves.
And that's why we want to share with you Tableau tips for beginners, because we know that while Tableau can be extremely powerful, it can also be pretty intimidating. I'm Kelly Bellinghausen, Engineering Manager at Tableau.
And I'm Harveen Kathuria, Senior Product Manager at Tableau.
But that's not all we are. We have families, we have friends, we have hobbies, and on rare occasion, we even get a little bit of sleep. And that's why we know that time is incredibly valuable.
Time is valuable to all of us. Since we have 60 minutes today, we'll focus on some key concepts to help you all get started with Tableau. Tableau is like a blank canvas. It offers various tools to help you answer questions and create visualizations the way you want. Some of the key concepts that we'll cover today include dimensions and measures. These are the building blocks of your visualization. We'll cover the distinction between discrete, blue fields, and continuous, green fields. Rows and columns shells add structure to your visualizations. Marks card is an important tool that adds depth to your visual analysis. Show Me is one of the most powerful tools in Tableau. It helps you create vizzes when you don't even know where to start. We'll briefly cover the advantages of calculated fields. We'll show you how you can create new data fields from your existing data source. Most importantly, we'll show you that insights require iteration and change in perspective. You may start with a question, and during your analysis workflow, ask many more questions to get to the right answer that you were looking for. Last but not the least, we'll show you how you can build interactive dashboards and share your insights with others.
Basically, our goal today is to share some useful tips, those things that we wish we had known when we both started using Tableau less than 2 years ago. We're hoping that at the end of this, you can't go out and necessarily replicate everything that we've done, but you'll remember a few of those tips, and one day when you hit a problem, you'll go, aha, remember that presentation and those women that told me that thing? Let me look it up and figure out how to do it. That's what we're hoping for today. Basically, our goal is to take you from, huh,
to aha. So Kelly and I are working moms who are extremely passionate about technical innovation. And this is one of the main reasons why we love working at Tableau. But what if we were to do something different? What if we did a startup together? With young kids at home, someone or the other is constantly falling sick in the house.
I'm sure some of you have kids. You know, the runny noses, the sneezing in your face, the coughing. They're basically just germ factories.
I like that. I should start calling my kids germ factories from now on.
Your kids might not like that.
All right, so let's just imagine that we have this unique idea for a healthcare startup. Let's say we've run this idea by a few customers, and there is strong interest. But before we invest time and effort into doing a startup together, we have some newbie questions. What are the top 10 startup segments? Is healthcare on the list? Where do startups get the most funding? Would we have to move to another state to be successful? What background do we need to be successful? And does it even really matter? While Kelly is more interested in the founder's background, be it educational or professional, I am interested in building a lucrative business and retiring early in life.
I'm good with that, too, for the record.
So let's dive in. Let's do a demo. All right. Let's start with the data. Here I have all my data in an Excel spreadsheet. My data includes information about the top 1,000 startups in the United States of America. It has columns such as the company name, IPO status, total funding, categories, location, and a lot more. I'm now going to bring this data into Tableau. When you launch Tableau, the first screen that you see is called as the Start page. Here on the right are links to various training videos. I personally found these very beneficial when I was learning Tableau. I, in fact, rewatched some of the videos. Down here are some sample workbooks. Again, these are great resources to familiarizing yourself with Tableau. On the left here, there are various connection options. Microsoft Excel is listed up here. I can either choose to click on the menu option here to open up my Excel file in Tableau, or I can simply drag and drop my Excel file onto Tableau here. And just like that, the data is now in Tableau. What you see on the screen now is called as the data source page. This is where I can preview my data. I can make sure all the columns from Excel are now in Tableau. Each column that is in Excel is a data field in Tableau, and each data field has a data type associated with it. Company name is a data field with a string data type. I'm sorry, guys. Whereas total funding is a data field with a number data type. Up at the top here, there are two connection options, extract and live. Extracts take a snapshot of your data, whereas the live connection gives you the benefit of real-time updates. As your data changes, the changes are reflected in Tableau. I will now show you the benefit of a live connection. Let's look at the company names a little bit closely. GoPro here is misspelled. There are two P's for pro. I'm going to go back to my Excel file and fix the typo. Click on Save, close my file, and hit on the refresh button. And just like that, the name has been updated. All right, now let's start answering the questions that we have by building visualizations. For this, I'm going to click on the Sheet tab at the bottom here. When you bring data into Tableau, Tableau separates it into dimensions and measures. Dimensions contain qualitative values such as categories, company name, geographical information, and more. Measures contain quantitative value such as last funding amount, money raised at IPO, basically numbers that can be measured. Notice that there are a few fields here that are highlighted in italic. These have been generated by Tableau. The latitude and longitude fields have been generated because I have geographical information in my data. The number of records field is basically the number of rows in your data. In my data, each row represents a startup, so I'm just going to go ahead and rename this field. To rename a field, simply right-click on the field, and from the context menu, choose Rename. Let's just call it Number of Startups. Perfect. I'm now going to add this field to my view by double-clicking on it. Now, look at what Tableau has done for me. Tableau created a pill for me and put it on the rows shelf. Since I added a measure to my view, Tableau used one of the default aggregation, sum in this case, to aggregate all the values in the data field. In my viz, this single bar or mark represents the total number of startups in my data, which is 1,000. I'm going to cover an important concept here. The green color of the pill represents that this is a continuous field. Continuous fields draw axes in your viz. All right, now the first question that we have is about the top 10 startup categories. I have a categories dimension. I'm going to simply double-click on it to add it to my view. Tableau added my categories dimension onto the columns shelf. Since categories is a dimension, my viz is now segmented by the different categories. Another important concept here, the blue color of the pill represents that this is a discrete field. Discrete field add discrete headers in your viz. Rows and columns shelves add structure to your visualization. The rows shelf creates the y-axis in your viz, whereas the columns shelf creates the x-axis in your viz. Here's a tip for you. If you want to swap rows and columns, simply click on the swap button up at the top here in the toolbar. All right, let's look at the categories now. Wow, looks like there are just too many categories in my viz. I can refer to the status bar here that gives me more information and gives me the makeup of my viz. 183 rows. Since my categories dimension is on the rows shelf, this means I have 183 categories. Those are just too many categories to go through. I'm interested in the top 10 categories. I'll now show you how easy it is to filter your viz in Tableau. I'm going to simply drag and drop the categories dimension onto the filters shelf. This opens up the filter dialog. There are various options here. I'm going to select top because I'm interested in the top 10 categories by the number of startups in each category. I'm selecting the by field option. I'm going to leave the field name as is, as well as the aggregation. I'm going to click on OK. And just like that, my viz has been updated. Another tip for y'all, if you want to sort your viz, simply click on the sort icon that's next to the axes header in your viz, just like that. All right. I'm just going to increase the font size of the headers so that people at the back can see it clearly as well. To increase the font size or to format your headers or even measures, just simply click on your drop-down option on your pill. From the context menu, select Format. Click on the font drop-down and maybe increase this to 7. OK, great. And make it bold. Hopefully, this is much more clear for you guys. All right, now let's look at these categories a little bit closely. Analytics is high up on the top. It has 87 startups. Again, this is based on the data that I have, followed by artificial intelligence and others. But hey, look, healthcare is on the list. That's promising for us. Now, I'm curious to see how many of these healthcare startups have gone public. I do have an IPO status dimension in my data. I'm now going to show you how you can use the marks card to add depth to your analysis. Marks card has various properties, or encodings, as we call them. I'm going to drag and drop the IPO status onto color. And just like that, my viz is segmented further, another level of detail for me. Here on the right is the IPO status legends card. Tableau very smartly added this for me. This shows me what each color represents. Personally, I find these colors to be way too bright for me. So I'm going to show you how you can customize your marks that are in your viz. I'm going to click on the color button here, go to Edit Colors, and Tableau offers an array of color palettes. I'm going to go ahead and choose brown. Click on Assign Palette. I'm happy with the color assignments here, so I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. Much better. I can also increase the size of the bars by simply clicking on the size button on the marks card and using my slider here. Perfect. Another tip for you. If you want to see the labels on your marks, simply click on Show Marks Label toolbar button, and this adds another detail to your viz. Let's look at the healthcare segment a little bit closely now. 28 private startups, whereas there are 2 public startups. Now, I'm curious to know a little bit more about these 2 public startups. I want to know a little bit about what the name of the company is, what funding did they have, basically the raw data behind this mark. I'm now going to show you one of the most useful features in Tableau, View Data. You can simply right-click on your mark, and from the context menu, choose View Data. The View Data window opens up. In the summary section here, what I'm looking at is basically the summarized view. This is the data that I'm already seeing in my viz. If you want to look at the raw data or the underlying rows that are used to make up that mark in your viz, simply click on Full Data. Perfect. Now I can see the company name, the location, the date, IPO date, VC name, funding, and a lot more. I didn't have to go back to Excel and search and look for any of this. Within Tableau, I can access the raw data. I can choose to export these 2 rows out into CSV file if I want to. All right, I'm going to now close this window. So I answered my initial question about the top 10 categories of startup and wanted to see if healthcare was on the list or not. Healthcare is definitely on the list. In addition to my initial questions, I also got more insights about the IPO status and was able to get more details about the 2 startups that have gone public. I can now do more research about them. I like this viz the way it is, so I'm going to name this by clicking on the Sheet tab at the bottom, and let's name it as Top 10 Categories. Notice when you change the name of your sheet, the title of your viz is also updated. All right, now let's try to answer the second set of questions that we have, which were more location-based. For this, I'm going to click on the New Sheet tab here at the bottom. Again, this opens up a new sheet for me, and this is where I'll do my analysis. I have geographical information in my data. I have country, state, and city dimensions. Tableau has created a hierarchical order for me, country being higher up, followed by state and city. I'm curious to first see the funding by country. I want to see what's the total funding for startups in United States of America. For this, I'm going to click on the country dimension, use the Command key on my Mac. If you are on a PC, use the Control key to multi-select. And then I'm going to click on total funding. And I'm going to drag and drop these fields onto my view. And just like that, Tableau created a map for me. In my previous viz, I double-clicked on the fields to create my viz. In this case, I dragged and dropped fields to the view to create my viz. So there are various options, there are various ways in which you can create vizes in Tableau. So total funding in United States of America, about $371 billion. That is so impressive. I didn't know that at all. Now I'm curious to see funding by state. Since I have a hierarchy of my geographical information, I can simply click on the plus sign here. And just like that, I'm now looking at funding by state. I didn't have to write a single line of code. Tableau makes it so easy to dive into details if you want to. Now, these are honestly just too many digits for me to process. So I'm going to change the formatting of the number. For this, I'm going to click on my measure pill, the total funding measure pill. From the context menu, choose Format. From the Numbers drop-down, I'm going to select Currency Custom and change the display unit to billions. Much better. All right, now let's just scan through the funding by state. Let's look at the East Coast. New York seems to have a lot of funding, about $82 billion of funding in startups. Wasn't aware of this at all. Let's go look into Central America. Texas also has some funding, $10.3 billion. That's fantastic to see. Wow, look at California. $190 billion in funding, total funding. That's impressive again. I mean, so much tech innovation is happening in California, but it's good to see that it's happening across the United States. Let's look at my home state, Washington. $5.6 billion, about $5.6 billion in total funding in Washington. Again, these are really impressive numbers for me. It looks very promising. Maybe doing a startup is the right approach for us. But before I get excited and start daydreaming about early in life, I have some more questions. Now, I'm guessing California has the highest funding. It's because it has the highest number of startups. Now, I do have a measure, number of startups. I'm going to now use the marks card to add more depth to my maps whiz. Since I'm already using the text property or text encoding to show the total funding by state, I'm going to drag and drop number of startups to the color encoding. Much better. Again, Tableau has smartly added a legends card for me here on the right. The darkest color represents the highest number of startups, whereas the lightest color represents the lowest number of startups. I wasn't wrong. California indeed has the highest number of startups. Based on my data, there are about 519 startups in the state of California. Now, you may say that, well, since the number of startups varies so drastically by state, let's look at Washington for that matter, 37. Let's focus on New York because it seems to have a darker tinge of color, 176 startups. So it varies by state. So you may say using the sum aggregation for total funding may not be the right aggregation. Guess what? Tableau makes it easy to change aggregations as well. I can simply click on the pill dropdown and change from, say, measure sum to average if I want to. But for my analysis, I'm going to stick with the sum aggregation. Perfect. Now, I don't want to change the colors again. Sorry, I'm just nitpicky about colors in my vizzes. So I'm going to go back onto the color button, click on it, go to Edit Colors, and select the brown palette. Click on the OK button here. Another tip for you. If you want to move the marks on the maps, simply click on the, if you want to move the labels on your marks, simply click on the label and move it, just like that. Again, these are little tricks and tips that we are sharing with you all. These are things that we've learned in the past 2 years. Now, I do have one more question. I see that in California, the number of startups are high. There is highest funding. Washington does have, some startups. There is funding in Washington as well. I'm now curious to see where the VCs are located. From what I understand, again, a newbie here, that we need to get some VC funding, some backing to be successful. I have a VC name dimension, venture capitalist name dimension, which is which has qualitative values again. What I'm interested is in the number of VCs by state. That means I'm looking at numbers or measures. Now, I'll show you how easy it is to convert a dimension into measure in Tableau. I'm going to simply drag and drop my dimension onto measures, and just like that, Tableau has changed it into a measure. Notice that Tableau also applied the count distinct aggregation to the VC name. What this is going to do is give me the distinct number of VCs. Since I'm already using text and color properties on my marks card for different measures, I'm going to now drag and drop the VC name measure onto Tooltip. Now let's go over and look at the state of California, and let's focus on Washington again. So California, based on my data, has 275 VCs, has a total number of 519 startups, and of course, total funding of about $190 billion. Let's look at Washington. 17 VCs, didn't know that. 37 startups, and of course, total funding of $5.6 billion. Again, Tableau has made it so easy for me to not only just ask my initial question, but has enabled me to ask more questions and dive into more details if I want to. So I now have a whiz that shows me the top 10 categories of startup. And then I have another whiz that shows me information by location. What if there was a way to stitch these together? I could be doing more analysis that way. I'm now going to demo one of my favorite features in Tableau, Vision Tooltip. For this, I'm going to click on the Tooltip button on the marks card. This opens up the Edit Tooltip dialog. I'm going to clean up my tooltip a little bit. Since I already have country and state, it's visible in my viz. I'm just going to remove this from the tooltip. Let me just increase the font size again for you guys, just to make sure it's visible. All right, I'm going to change the label for distinct count of VC names to number of VCs. I'm going to leave number of startups as is, and even remove total funding, because again, I can see it on my viz. Now going to click on the Insert button up at the top here. From the menu, select Sheets, and I'll select my top 10 categories sheet. What I'm doing here is essentially embedding my sheet into a tooltip. I can change the max width and height of the tooltip if I want to. I can also preview my tooltip. This looks good to me. I'm going to now click on the OK button here. All right, now let's again focus just on California and Washington and look at the top 10 categories of startups in those states. Analytics is high up, followed by artificial intelligence. Healthcare. There are about 15 private startups in the state of California with one public startup. What's happening with Vision Tooltip here is that it's updating my viz by state. So the information that I'm seeing is not about United States of America or across the board, but just by state. Let's look at Washington. Healthcare. Oh my, I didn't know that. 2 healthcare startups in the state of Washington, followed by cloud computing and others. All right, I'm done with my analysis now. I think I still need to do a lot more work, some more research. I've come to the conclusion that based on the data that I have and the analysis that I have done so far, we could potentially have a startup in the state of Washington. Healthcare is high up, so looks like people are investing in this segment. That being said, looks like California is the hub right now of innovation. It has the highest number of VCs, highest total funding. We don't want to move out of Washington, but maybe we'll have to come up with a game plan of traveling to California and tapping some of these resources. I'm not too excited about traveling. I don't know what Kelly thinks about it. We'll have to do some more research and see if we still want to do a startup together or not.
So, what you may have already noticed, just from watching us today, is that Harveen and I are actually two very different people. When given the opportunity to present to hundreds, Harveen wore a very classic, classy suit. When given the opportunity to present to hundreds, and this was not a part of our gig, this is just who we are, I wore my fancy black jeans and I even tucked in my t-shirt. She's a Mac person. I'm a PPC person. She drinks water. My Diet Coke is hidden right here. We're also different in how we thought about the startup. She focused on important things in the future, like, is healthcare viable? She focused on, would we have to move? I kind of backed up a little bit. I said, do we even have what it takes to have a startup? What type of educational background do the founders have? Do we have the right degrees, the right majors? Are we prepared to have a startup? So while she was looking at a different set of data, I found my own data. I found data on startup founders. I've got about 2,000 founders in this file. What type of degree they got, what subjects their degree was in, what schools they went to. I'm going to take this data and go ahead and pull it into Tableau. I'll open up Tableau, go over to Microsoft Excel, move up to the desktop, and choose my founder data and click OK. But that's not enough. Just knowing where the founders went to school doesn't tell me if they were successful. Maybe they had a startup and they made $200 for it and said, nah, let's not do this. So I also need to know what type of funding the startups had. That's not in my current data set. So I went out and searched some more, and I found a second data set that has information on startup funding. Very basic data set. It has a company name and a funding total. Now, I want to bring these columns together. I want every founder with a startup to have a funding total associated with it. Tableau can do this for me very easily. I go back to Tableau, to the left-hand side of my screen. On Connections, I click Add. I choose Microsoft Excel again, and I choose my funding data and click OK. Now, here's a tip. Tableau gets it right a lot of the time. It tries to do the right thing for you. In this case, it has made a join on my data. With that said, Tableau is not perfect, so it's always a good idea to check and see how Tableau chose to join your data. I'm going to mouse over the connection, and I see that Tableau did an inner join of my two different data sets on company name. In this case, that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted to know the funding associated with the company associated with the founder. And I can look down below and see that that's exactly what I have. If you wanted to change the join type, simply click on the join, and you can change the type as well as the join clauses. But Tableau got it right today, so I don't have to do that. I look at my columns. I've got all of the columns from my founder data on the left-hand side, and I've got the columns from my funding data on the right-hand side. I've actually got company name as a column twice because it existed in both sets of data. I don't really need that to happen. I just need company name once. So I'm going to right-click on the second column name for company name and click Hide. Now I have no unnecessary columns in my data. I have what I need. So here's my secret. I loved school. I actually went to school for 10 years. I got 3 degrees. Now, a lot of it I used. My BS in computer science, every day. My BAs and BSs in political science and Spanish, occasionally at a Mexican restaurant and maybe while watching the news. That's pretty much it. So I'm a little sensitive about, did I go to school for too long, or will these degrees actually help us if we have a startup? So what I want to look at is funding total for the startup and the degrees of the founder. Here's a tip. If you know what you want to look at, but you're not sure yet how you want to look at it, Show Me is a great way to go. You'll find Show Me in the top right-hand corner of the screen, right there. If you click on it, you'll see about 24 visualization types, and right now they're all grayed out. Tableau's good. Tableau can't build a visualization without a field. That's kind of necessary. So I'm going to go over to the right-hand side of the screen, and I'm going to click on Degree Type. And now you see Show Me has changed. There's suddenly one highlighted visualization type. If I wanted to create a text table with just degree type, I could do that. But I want to pull in funding total too. So I'm going to Control-click on Windows to multi-select. That would be Command if you're a Mac person like Harveen is. And then I've got 2 fields selected on the left-hand side. Now you'll see that the Show Me panel is a lot more exciting. There are several visualizations that are highlighted that I can choose from, and Tableau will build that visualization for me. You'll see that one visualization is highlighted with orange. That is your recommended visualization. For the data that I have selected, Tableau thinks it would be best if I tried a horizontal bar chart. I'll give that a try. I click, and there we have right away a bar chart with funding total sum and degree type. I look at the data, great. BS degree, got one of those. That's promising. There's a lot of funding for people with a BS degree. But I don't really know if that's the answer to my question. Maybe everyone with a BS degree just tries to go out and create a startup, and that's why the funding total is so high. I'm going to need to change the aggregation type on my funding total. I click on the drop-down, go to Measure, and choose Average. Some of you math people say I should have used median. You're probably right. We won't talk about that one right now. And no, that is not what I wanted to see. Based on the data that I have, I would have been much better off with about 8 less years of schooling and just getting an associate's degree. This is not what I wanted to see. Maybe if I look at this with a different visualization type, I'll feel better about it. If you don't like your visualization type and you want to change to a new visualization, Show Me can also be very useful. I go back up to the right-hand side, I click on Show Me. Tree maps, those are cool these days, right? I'll make it a tree map. So it turns out that changing the visualization type didn't change the message. I went to school for far too long. Maybe if I made it a packed bubble chart. Now I know how to do that change. I'll go over to the marks card, click to expand, and choose circle. Nope, same data, same message. Didn't really actually help. Here's another tip. Don't be afraid to play around with your visualization type in Tableau. There's this wonderful button called Undo. You can always go back to where you were. I like the tree map. I'm going back to my tree map. So this doesn't tell me what I wanted to hear, so I really want to dig in to understand why this is. I'm happy with the current visualization. I'm going to name this degrees. But I want to learn more about who those founders were with associate's degrees. Like, why were they so successful? What type of startups were they creating? So I'm going to start a new visualization now by clicking on the New Worksheet button. I'm going to pull in funding total, and then, oh, sorry, let me back up. Before I do that, well, no, I'll go ahead and pull in funding total. That's a good idea. I'll put it on columns, though. I'll drag and drop it up here. So I've got $62.9 billion in funding across all of my different founders. Next, I want to segregate that by the name of the founder, so I double-click on founder name. And I can see here's my founders, and here's the funding they have. But I want to know more than just the founder name. I want to know the company name, the degree type, the school they went to, what their subjects were. I'm going to pull all those fields over too. I use multi-select again to grab the other fields I'd like to add in. And then I drag and drop those over to the rows shelf and drop. And now I have a table with all of that information and funding total at the end. For me personally, I think I'd prefer to look at funding in the form of text instead of a bar chart. That's a very easy change to make. I'll go up to columns, click on funding total, and drag it down to label. Now I have a text chart with all of the information about my founders, their funding totals, and where they went to school. This will make it a lot easier for me to dig into who the founders were that had associate degrees. Here's a tip. A lot of people get a little intimidated by the analytics pane. I strongly recommend that every now and then you venture into that dark territory and check it out. You'll find it's not quite as scary as you think it is. In this case, I'm going to go over to my data pane, find the Analytics tab right next to it, click on it. And for the visualization that I have, there's only two options right now, cluster and totals. I think totals would be more interesting. That way, for any set of founders that I have, I can see the total funding across all of them at the bottom of my table. I'll drag totals over to my visualization, drop it on column grand totals, and then when I scroll to the bottom of my table, there it is, the total of all the funding for all the founders. Not interesting right now, but later when I can filter by degree type, this will be an interesting thing to know. All right, I think I'm done with this sheet. I'm going to click and I'm going to name this founder table. Oops, after I put my fingers on the right keys. There we go. So previously you saw Harveen pull together two visualizations. She used something called Viz in Tooltip. For me, I'm going to use a dashboard. A dashboard is a way to bring two or more visualizations together and have them interact in ways that will let you get insights from your data. The dashboard add button is right down here next to add worksheet. I click on it and I come to a dashboard layout screen. I want to have my degrees for sure, so I'll go ahead and drag that over. And I also want to have my founder table on the same dashboard. When I click to drag it over, you'll see that I get a little gray box indicating where it would go if I dropped it. I just want it right at the bottom underneath my degrees, so I'll drop it there. Now, I have both of my visualizations on one dashboard, but this isn't really aesthetically pleasing. I'm no expert in dashboard design, but there's a whole lot of white space going on right here. I'm going to try to make this easier to read and a little more appealing to the user. Here's a tip. By default, dashboards are tiled, but you're not limited to keeping them tiled. You can actually make things float and move them where you'd like them to go. I think this legend is useful, but I also think it's taking up a ton of real estate. So I'm going to click on the legend, click on the drop-down, and select floating. Now I have the freedom to move this wherever I want to. I'm going to pull it down here right next to my table of founders, and that way it won't be in the way of my visualization. I'll just shrink it up a little too. There we go. But now my tree map, it's all kind of squished up in the corner. I want it to take up the full real estate of the screen. If you want to change what your visualization is displaying as within its container, come to the drop down right here at the top of the screen, click on it, and you have the choice of fitting the width, fitting the height, or fitting the entire view. For me, I want my tree map to take up the entire view, so I click on entire view, and there. That looks a lot better. Now I can see my tree map, hopefully you guys can see it as well, and it takes up more of the screen so I don't have any white space wasting my space. But nothing exciting happens yet. If I click on the degrees, my founders list stays the same. What I really want to have happen is when I click on a degree type, I want my founders to be filtered. This is incredibly easy to do in a dashboard. All you have to do is come over to the right-hand side of your worksheet and click this button, Use as Filter. Nothing seems to have happened until, there we go. I click on Associate's degree, and my founders are filtered to just those founders with an associate's degree. All right, I'm feeling a little better now. Turns out only 2 of my founders had an associate's degree, and Scott Painter from TrueCar, he really skewed the data. With his startup, he had $283 million, and that really skewed the numbers for associate's degree. That makes me feel like maybe it was an outlier, and maybe it wasn't telling me that I went to school for too long. I look around and I see there's the PhD I didn't get, but here's the BS degree, the BA degree, and the master's that I have, all pretty high on the list. I'm feeling pretty good. And if I actually look further, though, I see that computer science is pretty common, but business is popping up a lot. If I scroll even further, I'll see that there's MBA, there's BBA. There's a lot of people with a business background. So here's my secret. Even though I have all those degrees, I never took a single business class. This has made me really insecure about a startup. I worry that maybe I should have taken business classes to help myself be prepared. And I want to convince Harveen that it's a good idea for me to go back to school and get that business degree. But I'm going to need data. Harveen will never listen to just because I want to. She's going to want to see the data. So I'm going to create a new worksheet, and I'm going to look at funding totals for those people who have business in their background versus those who don't. I'll go ahead and double-click on funding total, and then, So here's a problem. People who took MBA degrees have business backgrounds. People who have BBA degrees have business backgrounds. And people with any other degree type where the subject was business also have a business background. I don't have a single field in my data that gives me that information. What I'm going to need to do is create a calculated field to pull those little bits of insight from the different fields. There's huge debate about the right way to create a calculated field. People will tell you this dropdown is the only way. I still prefer right-clicking on the data pane. Whatever makes you happy, it works both ways. I'm going to create a calculated field, and I'm going to name it business background. So, as I said before, there are 3 things to consider. Is the degree type equal to MBA? Or is the degree type equal to BBA? Or is the major equal to business? And just like that, I have a calculated field, except that I made an error, and Tableau is letting me know that. If you look at the bottom of my calculated field dialog, you'll see this calculation contains an error. When I click on it, I learn that I have a reference to an undefined field called majors. And that's because my data was generalized across lots of different programs, and so it didn't necessarily say major, it said subjects. I remember now. I'll delete major, and here's a tip that we actually learned in practicing this presentation. You can drag and drop from the data pane into the calculated fields pane to get the fields you need. Good insight that we learned while learning this presentation. So, all right, now my calculation is now valid. There's something to keep in mind, that a valid calculation is not a correct calculation. In this case, I'm only looking at the situation where subjects is equal to business. As someone who collected majors, I should know that someone might have a list of majors with business only being one of them, or someone might have a major that contains the word business, like business administration, but it's not that the entire subject is equal to business, it's that business is within the subject. So I need to come up with a way to figure out if subjects contains business. Here's a tip. Tableau gives you lots of options for functions. And right here in the calculated fields pane, you can search and learn about those functions. I'm going to come over and say, is there a contains method? And there is. And Tableau not only tells me how to use it and gives an example, but it tells me what it does. Returns true if the string contains the substring. Perfect. I want to know if subject contains business. And done. So now I feel like my calculated field is both valid and correct. I click OK, and keep your eye on the data pane. Bam. Now I have a new field, business background. It's a true-false field and a dimension, because it just has the 2 discrete values. I double-click on it, and that's not what I was hoping for. In total funding, you're actually better off without a business degree than with one, or a business background. Let me try to change it over to average, and maybe on average. No, that's not what I wanted to see either. Even on average, founders without a business background were more successful than those with. Now, this is correlation, not causation. It doesn't mean that a MBA wouldn't be good for me, but it does mean that I might not be able to convince Harveen that an MBA would be good for me. That's okay.
Please. Sorry, this is what I was trying to do. Wah, 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 Kelly.
I personally got it the first time. You know, it's okay. It's okay if I can't go back to school. You know, I really do love working with Harveen, even though she gives me a hard time sometimes. I really do love working at Tableau. And quite honestly, I love the opportunity to fight with PowerPoint in front of hundreds of people. No, to present to a group of people like you guys today and help people learn how to see and understand their data. So.
All right, thanks. Well, I truly love working at Tableau myself, Kelly. As a PM, I get to interact with our customers so regularly, which is the best part of my job. So it looks like our startup plan is falling apart at this point. All right, so let's focus on some of the key concepts that we covered today. Important points to remember: measure and dimensions are your building blocks. Rows and columns add structure to your visualization. Mars card adds depth. Start with a question and keep asking more. Play with your data, it's safe. Use resources to learn and get better. We will be sharing this deck with everyone in a few days, and in the deck will be links to useful resources for you all.
It's also a good time to get your hands dirty, and I don't mean with kid germs, I mean with the Tableau products. You've gotten the basics from us, now go and try it out. If you want to learn more about Tableau Desktop, consider attending Calling All Tableau Rookies. Maybe your data isn't quite as clean as ours was, and it needs a little manipulation, a little massaging. Consider going to Go with the Flow Tableau Prep for Beginners. Maybe you've got so much data, you don't even know where to start. You want to ask plain text questions to get visualizations, to get a head start on where you might eventually want to go with your data investigation. Consider going to Hands-On with Ask Data. And finally, maybe you thought the calculated fields were really cool, you want to learn more about what kind of calculations you can do in Tableau. Go to Introduction to Calcs. What is a calculation?
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for the time.